How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hip Drop Podcast. Lucas and I are back for the Wednesday edition. We will be previewing upcoming Week 14s, kicking off tomorrow night in a pivotal, very pivotal NFC matchup in Motown. The Detroit Lions coming off a loss, hosting the Dallas Cowboys coming off 3 consecutive wins. Two teams currently on the outside looking in of the NFC playoff picture. We got some big matchups. The Chiefs playing for their lives on Sunday night. We got a matchup for first place in the AFC North between the Steelers and the Ravens. We have a matchup for NFC North supremacy for the Bears and the Packers, potentially the 1 seed as well. And then the Eagles and the Chargers on Monday night. That's a pivotal matchup in itself. Two teams, the Eagles trying to get back on track, the Chargers trying to stay in the hunt. Lucas and I did not express much confidence for them yesterday. But first of all, Lucas, how are you doing today?
2-0, 2-0, right? Had a bad start to last week, picks-wise, because I went 0 for 4. The Lightning had their 7-game win streak, knocked eliminated last night. 2-0, right? Overall, just I've kind of moved on emotionally from this season for the Chiefs. So they better not reel me back in.
A win against the Texans might just do that. And there are a lot of disadvantages. They're without Josh Simmons. They might be without Trey Smith again, going up against a pass rush that, in case you haven't noticed, is pretty good with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter screaming out the edges. And in my opinion, the best defense in football. So before we get to that, Lucas and I have some other topics to go over. Coaches. There are a lot of coaches in the NFL who I feel like are not certain to be the coaches of their teams next season. A lot of them. To be exact, we're going to be discussing 7 in the AFC and then 3 in the NFC. So 10 coaches in total. Lucas and I are going to spend a lot of time on a lot of them. We'll spend more time on some than others, some of the more controversial ones. But we're going to go by division, and we're going to start in the AFC East. And we did this earlier. And 2 coaches that were in that clump have been fired. Brian Callahan, of course, was fired after week 6, and Brian Daboll was fired after week 10. So there's 2 openings in New York and Tennessee. One of the coaches that was in that discussion that we talked about when we did our first hot seat rankings was Mike McDaniel, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And if you asked me a month ago, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion that Mike McDaniel would be fired. I mean, they were 2-7. They were dead in the water. They were maybe one of, if not the worst team in football the first 2 months of the year. But since then, Lucas, the Dolphins have kind of turned some things around. They've won 3 straight. They have an advantageous matchup against the Jets this week, a game that you think they'd be able to win. The Jets are obviously not good. So Mike McDaniel is building up more of a case to keep his job. They're 5-7. They're showing up on In the Hunt graphics on ESPN and NBC when they show the playoff picture, something that I would not have foreseen before the season. So, Lucas, we'll rotate. So you go first and I'll go first. So do you think Mike McDaniel, with a month to go left in the season, will be fired?
I'm going to go with the upset. I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I just think if he would have been fired, they would have maybe cleaned him out with Chris Greer. But at the same time, I don't think he's that bad of a coach. I do think sometimes he's corny, but he's objectively a good offensive mind. And the Dolphins haven't exactly been the best drafting team since he entered the NFL. And part of that is on him for scouting, but he's never had a great offensive line. The defense is not very talented, and he lost Tyreek Hill, and they're winning a bunch of games. I don't think he's some sort of elite Super Bowl coach, but at the same time, I'd probably give him another year. But where I could be wrong is maybe new GM wants a new head coach, and that forces Mike McDaniel out.
Yeah, so the tough one, man, because a month ago I would have said yes, instantly. As of right now, I'm still going to say yes, because they're not going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. They might win Sunday against the Jets, but they're probably going to be like a 6-11, 7-10 type team. I just think the Mike McDaniel era in Miami has reached its peak, and that peak was getting blown out in the wild card round by the Chiefs in 2023. I think he's a good offensive mind. I think he'll be a good hire for an offensive coordinator position. I just don't think he's good enough. I just think it's time for a change. It's time to get another voice in there for the Dolphins, because that thing's been trending down for a while, and they were so hilariously bad to start the season. And I don't think a winning streak against, let's be honest, look, the win against the Bills was nice, but the Commanders are terrible. The Saints are a bottom three team in the league. And if they lose to the Jets this week, which I think is more possible than others might think, considering it's in New York, I think the talks of McDaniel coming back might be put to bed permanently. So I'm going to say yes as of now. If the Dolphins actually like do get hot and finish like 8-9 or 9-8 and you know barely miss the playoffs because they're not going to get in. I'd be floored if they get in, but like barely miss the playoffs. I'd say maybe they bring him back, try it again one more year. But I just think the mess is too big, and I don't think he's doing enough to clean it up. And I don't think it's going to be enough to clean up by the year's end. So I think they're going to make a change, and I think they're going to look for new leadership in Miami. That's my personal opinion, although that can change. I'm less confident about that than I was a week or a month ago, rather. Next coach. This one's a little more controversial, Lucas, because we're gonna have to use hypotheticals for this one, and that's Sean McDermott of the Buffalo Bills. Now, on the surface, that sounds insane because the Bills have been one of the more successful teams in the league over the past half decade. They're 8-4. They had I wouldn't say season saving, but a pretty important win against the Steelers last Sunday. They did it with a convincing performance in the second half. So they're currently seventh in the AFC playoff picture. I think it would take a miracle for them to win the division. So if they're going to get to the Super Bowl this year, they're going to have to play 3 games and they're going to have to go on the road. Their best bet is get to 5 seed and to play whatever Joker wins the AFC North. And we'll get to the AFC North here shortly. But if the Bills lose before the AFC Championship, Lucas, do you think Sean McDermott will be fired? So you went first last time. I'm going to go first this time. I'm going to say no. I think Brandon Beane potentially could get fired if the Bills don't win a playoff game. I'll say, let's use that qualifier. If the Buffalo Bills fail to win a playoff game this year, is McDermott out? I'm going to say no, but I think it really, really turns up the pressure in 2026 because look, last year they were so close to going to the Super Bowl. 2023, they fought back from 6-6 to get to get to the divisional round and host the divisional round and be the 2 seed. They have won 13 games 3 different times in his tenure. They've won the division 5 years in a row. That might be coming to an end this year, but they'll still be a playoff team. I still think they have a Super Bowl ceiling. um, I think McDermott will be on the hot seat going into next year, but I do not think he'll be fired, even if the Bills don't win a playoff game this year.
I've gone back and forth on this. I'm going to say no. He will not be
Okay.
fired. He will be back. If they miss the playoffs, then probably. If they go one and done, it's 50-50. It depends on the circumstances. But I just think the Bills will win at least one playoff game. Whether they win
I do
2 or
too.
3 is up remains to be seen. But I think if the Bills are in the divisional round, then I think his job is going to be safe.
Yes, if they win a playoff game, he's safe. I feel like firing a coach after a playoff win is really bad optics. The Titans did that with Mike Mularkey. Lucas, these are bad memories for you and I. After 2017, he won a playoff game against a certain team in the Midwest, and then they lost to New England. They fired him. They brought in Mike Vrabel, who obviously is a better coach, but firing a coach after a playoff win is very, very rare. So I don't see that happening. Even if they lose in the first round, I still think McDermott will be back, but I think it will up the pressure for 2026. All right, going to the AFC North. We're gonna spend a lot of time in this division because all 4 fan bases are very unhappy with their head coaches at the moment. We'll start with the easiest one. We'll start from the bottom with Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. He was in the first batch of coaches we discussed early in the season. So Cleveland's 3-9. They're not going anywhere with a loss to the Titans this week, which is actually unlikely because we know what the Titans are. They'll be eliminated from the playoffs sooner rather than later. They're just a bad team. Do you think Kevin Stefanski is out after the season? Because weirdly enough, the Browns have never won a playoff game in his tenure with him on the sidelines. They won one in 2020, but if you remember, he was out for COVID in that game. Mike Pryfer was their head coach. They've only made the playoffs twice. They won 3 games last year. They're probably going to win maximum 5 games this year, and that might be generous. Do you think Kevin Stefanski is out after this season?
I'm going to say yes,
Okay.
only primarily because I just think Jimmy Haslem might clean house. I don't think Kevin Stefanski deserves to get fired. If I had to just say, does he deserve to get fired in a vacuum? I would say no. But will he practically? I think yes, because I think the entire front office and a head coach and coaching staff be will be basically kicked out. I don't know why I'm fumbling words. They'll be extinguished. They'll be fired. Whatever adjective you want to use. I just think it's time for a change in Cleveland. It seems like they may have peaked with Stefanski in 2020, and even though I think this fall off hasn't really been his fault, because I think the talent on offense with the Browns is a joke, as I said yesterday. At the same time, the Browns just might want fresh blood. Like, they're going to have a new quarterback, probably, unless Shedeur Sanders really shows some potential. They're going to have a new front office, or at least they should. This team needs a reset, and even though I think Stefanski's a quality coach and should be hired again, I think that will involve changing both leadership positions at GM and head coach.
Yeah, like I think Stefanski will be fired. And again, like, do I think he's an awful coach? No. But the results are the results. And I think the Deshaun Watson trade really set this franchise back in a horrific manner. But they're likely going to be a 3 or 4 win team, maybe 5 if they're lucky. And I just think Jimmy Haslam will say, like, okay, like we've been at this for 6 years. We've had some good moments, but by and large, it hasn't really worked. Again, Stefanski's not a bad coach. I just think the fit is no longer there. So yeah, I think he will be fired. I think he might get another head coaching job maybe not next year, but maybe in the near future. But I do think the Browns will have a new coach in 2026. It'll be interesting to see who that will be and who their quarterback will be. Because I don't know if their week 1 starter is currently on the roster. All right, next one. Cincinnati, Zach Taylor. Okay, they're 4-8. They won on Thanksgiving in Baltimore. There are people who think they have a shot to win the division. I'm not there yet. I just think I don't trust their defense yet, and partially I don't trust Zach Taylor because I don't know if he's a good enough coach to win that many games in a row to get to the postseason. I think Zach Taylor should be fired after this year. I don't think he will be fired. I just think Mike Brown is so cheap. They just are so hesitant to make a change. Marvin Lewis was there for a million years and accomplished nothing. They never won a playoff game. And Zach Taylor, who I think is a below average coach, they went to the Super Bowl. They went to 2 AFC championship games. They're going to look back at that and say, look, he got us there. Why can't he again? And look, I think the Bengals have reached their peak with Zach Taylor. I think bringing him back would be a mistake. But I just think they're going to win just enough games because their last 3 games are a joke against Miami, Arizona, and Cleveland. They're going to be 7-10, maybe 8-9, and they're going to fool themselves again to thinking that their window's still open when in reality it's probably not. So I do think Zach Taylor will be back, even though he shouldn't be.
I have the exact same opinion of you. I think this is the opposite of Kevin Stefanski, where I think Stefanski will be fired but doesn't deserve to be. I think Zach Taylor will not be fired and he deserves to be. We saw when Joe Burrow went out early when Jake Browning was playing, the Bengals coaching staff does not make this team better in any significant way. Al Golden is not an NFL defensive coordinator. I don't think Zach Taylor is a good play caller, play designer, or head coach, but Joe Burrow just might save this coaching staff. I think
Yeah.
if the Bengals wanted a healthy future, they may have needed Burrow to sit out another game or two, lose another game, guarantee they miss the playoffs. Maybe that forces change, but I think the Bengals are going to win enough games down the stretch, kind of like last year, to save Zach Taylor's job, and he will be back in 2026.
Yeah, which, again, if you're a Bengals fan, like, you should be rooting for fun losses. You should not want to beat Buffalo this week. You should not want to beat Baltimore. If you want to beat the Dolphins and the Browns, fine. All the power to you. But most Bengals fans despise Zach Taylor and want him gone. And if they win these games and are in contention to win that joke of a division, he'll be back. So I think it's better for the future of the franchise if they lose. But I just think 7-10 might be enough. All right, next one. Baltimore, John Harbaugh. The Ravens are 6-6. They went on a 5-game winning streak, but that came to a very, very thunderous halt against the Bengals last Thursday on Thanksgiving. They get blown out at home. Look, they start 1-5. It looked like Harbaugh was a dead man walking. But this Ravens team, I just think, is pretty uninspiring. They just feels like it's run its course, feels like the window has been missed. And I think Harbaugh is a very accomplished coach. I think he would get another job quickly. But I do think there's a case to be made. It's run its course in Baltimore. So, Lucas, if the Ravens miss the playoffs or if they make the playoffs but have an early exit, do you think John Harbaugh will be fired?
This is probably the hardest one we'll do today. I'm gonna just lean like 52-48 no. That's just because I don't think the Ravens have had enough bad years yet in this current stretch to warrant him being gone. But I understand it. Like I think people who say the Ravens should have a new coach are perfectly valid. I just don't think in practicality in real life. I don't know if Steve Bisciotti is gonna go through with it because Steve Bisciotti loves the Harbaugh family. He loves John Harbaugh. So I don't think a year where Lamar Jackson missed several games due to an injury and is clearly playing hurt, I don't think that's going to, and plus a year where they could still win the division, I don't think that's going to be enough for Bisciotti to pull the trigger. So I'm going to say he is back next year, but if Bisciotti does make the maybe correct decision, I'm not going to sit here and criticize him, but I do think there's a 52% chance he remains head coach next season.
Yeah, do you think I think it's more likely Harbaugh gets traded or leaves on his own terms than he gets fired. I think Steve Bisciotti has too much respect for him. He won that organization a Super Bowl. They've been to the playoffs most of the years he's been there. They've been to 4 AFC championship games. I think if the season ends poorly and looking at their schedule, I think it's more likely than not, unless their offense turns it around. I think a mutual parting of ways is more likely than a firing for John Harbaugh. With that being said, and this is similar, this is the McDermott thing. This is if they miss the playoffs, if they fail to win the AFC North, I don't think John Harbaugh's back in Baltimore. I think he will go to another team on his own terms or get traded, whether it's to the Giants, whether it's to the Falcons, and we'll get to them later. I mean, that's a pretty easy one. Whoever it is, I don't think he's back in Baltimore if they miss the playoffs, because most of the season, even their wins, has been pretty uninspiring. Pretty uninspiring, in my opinion. And maybe, like I said, it's maybe time for a change. Speaking team that's in a somewhat similar position, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin, they are 6-6. They are the other team in contention to win that division. They're coming off consecutive losses, including fairly embarrassing loss to the Bills last Sunday. They were up 7-3 at halftime. They lose 26-7. They don't score in the second half. Look, we all know the story of Mike Tomlin, no losing seasons, also no playoff wins since 2016. And I don't see the playoff win drought changing this year, which is disappointing because they started 4-1. It looked like maybe they could win a round. That does not look to be the case at the moment. I don't think Mike Tomlin will be fired or will leave, regardless how the season ends. I do think he'll be back in Pittsburgh next year. I think he's more likely to be back than Harbaugh is, just because I just think it's a situation where he'll have the job as long as he wants it, and it's pretty unlikely Aaron Rodgers is back next season. He's a free agent, and he's shown signs of his age in recent games. So I think they're going to try to either trade up for a quarterback or maybe bring in a Daniel Jones or a Kyler Murray, one of these younger guys, to see if they can actually build a window with a quarterback, with a younger quarterback. Regardless of what they do, I do think Mike Tomlin will be back, even if the season ends sour in Pittsburgh, meaning they miss the playoffs.
I actually have the opposite opinion. And 2 years ago, I was a staunch Tomlin defender. Like, I remember before the 2023 season, I was living in Baltimore, and I went out to dinner with with a friend of a friend.
It's getting harder to defend him, in my opinion.
In a big group who's a Steelers fan. He's a Steelers fan, and I was a coworker, actually. Very anti-Harbaugh, but I was like saying, nah, the Steelers are competitive. He's making not very good rosters, somewhat competitive. I do kind of see where he's coming from now. I do think Mike Tomlin has run his course. But like I said with Harbaugh, whether I think he deserves to go or not is kind of irrelevant. I don't know if the Rooney families I don't know if the Rooney family is actually going to pull the trigger and fire him. Like, I think Tomlin being traded, I think, is more likely than Harbaugh, because I just don't know how the Rooney family doesn't listen to the fan base. I think Mike Tomlin has run his course. He's had a lot of great years in Pittsburgh. None of those great years have been in the past 5 or 6 years. I think it's time for him to go. I think there are certain teams, like maybe the Giants, that want to take a chance on him. But I just think Pittsburgh needs something new. But whether the Rooney family agrees with me is not relevant. So I'm taking a chance, but I'm going to say Harbaugh or Tomlin is not there next year. I'm not saying he's going to be fired, but I don't think he's going to be the coach in 2026. But I'm going out on a limb.
And that's if they miss the playoffs. That's if they don't win the North. If they win the division, you think he'll be
Yep.
back? Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
Okay. So it's dependent for Tomlin and Harbaugh. It's dependent on who wins that division, whether they're back or not. Whoever doesn't, I
Yep.
think is somewhere else, or just not coaching in general. All right, next coach. This should not be very hard. Pete Carroll of the Las Vegas Raiders, 74 years old, oldest coach in NFL history. Oh, look, the Raiders had some expectations this year to see, like, hey, like we brought some respectability. We'll be competitive. We'll be a feisty, maybe 8 or 9 win team. Nope, they're terrible. They're 2-10. They're just as bad, if not worse, than they were last year. Lucas, do you think Pete Carroll is fired or will retire after this season?
He's going to retire. I just don't understand how anyone could watch this Raiders team and think, oh, yeah, Pete Carroll should be back.
Yeah,
And part of it is I think the game has passed Pete Carroll by. We kind of saw signs at the end of his Seattle tenure, just a little bit, but he just did a very poor job assembling the staff. Like Patrick Graham has survived multiple tenures, multiple regimes of head coaches and GMs. I guess he should have been the defensive coordinator because Pete Carroll thought so. But Chip Kelly, that hire never really made sense to me as offensive coordinator. That was a really weird decision by a very experienced head coach. And because mainly Pete Carroll's a big run the football guy, Chip Kelly is not exactly the biggest run the football guy. And it clearly stunted Ashton Genty's growth as a player. So I just think that was a weird decision by Carroll. I think he's going to retire. I think it's absolutely insane if the Raiders allow him to coach next year. I just don't know
yeah,
what Tom Brady, the owner, is doing. I think the Raiders should be like, hey, we'll pay you part of if you agree to maybe take on an advisory role, we'll pay you part of your contract and we're not going to fire you. We're going to save you the embarrassment. Kind of like what happened with Seattle a little bit, because I think Carroll's has earned the benefit of the doubt to not be fired. But if Carroll's really steadfast, I'm going to coach next year, then I do think they have to fire him.
I agree. I don't think he's gonna be fired. I think he's gonna retire. I think he's gonna walk away. I think he's gonna realize, like, hey, I probably made a mistake coaching this team. They're not as far along as I thought they'd be. Look, Pete Carroll, similar to, I think Tomlin, and Harbaugh, I think the game has passed all three of those coaches by a little bit. Um, he had a great run in Seattle, won a Super Bowl, got to two, probably should have 2 rings, but that's neither here nor there. It just was a failed experiment. It didn't work. It didn't work in an emphatic manner. And I think the Raiders will have a new coach next year. I just think there's no reason to bring him back with how big of a disaster this has been. And he'll step away and enjoy his life. That's better than coaching the Raiders, in my opinion. All right, next coach we're going to discuss in Lucas's neck of the woods. This would have been an insane thought a year ago, but I think it's worth discussing now. Kevin O'Connell of the Minnesota Vikings. I mentioned this yesterday. They're 4-8. They've lost 4 in a row. Their offense is terrible. They have the worst quarterback room in the league, and they're going on 4 years of his tenure without a playoff victory. They made the playoffs twice. They went one and done both times, and they've missed the playoffs twice with 2 losing seasons. Um, I do not think Kevin O'Connell will or should be fired. I do think there's a chance he enters next season in, look, man, you don't win a playoff game, you're done. And I think Kevin O'Connell is a really smart coach. I think he's a really good offensive mind. I think he's a really good play caller. I think he's being held back by the fact that JJ McCarthy is terrible at this point in his career. Max Brosmer is obviously not an NFL player, and Carson Wentz is Carson Wentz. Like the quarterback situation was just an absolute train wreck, and he needs to wear some of it because I feel like he has some say in whether Sam Darnold is back this year because he wanted to roll with McCarthy. Their GM, I can't pronounce his full name, Quasi, whatever his name is. He needs to wear some of it as well. With that said, I do think O'Connell's back. Like it's a really bad season, but they won 14 games just 1 year ago, and he has elevated like subpar quarterbacks in the past, whether that be Josh Dobbs, whether that be Nick Mullins, um, whether that not that Kirk Cousins was bad at that point, but he got some really good play out of Kirk Cousins too. He resurrected Sam Darnold's career. Like he's had success that has not come in the postseason, but I think firing would be a little bit too premature. He'll be in Minnesota in 2026.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, I think he deserves to be fired more than Kevin O'Connell. I think it would be absolute insanity if O'Connell left. I think this might be a little conspiracy brained, but if Andy Reid were to retire, I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin O'Connell attempted to jump ship to Kansas City, but that's irrelevant to the point. I do think O'Connell does not deserve to be fired. It would just be an insane move. I do think the GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah deserves to be scrutinized. Just look at the past 3 to 4 years of draft history for the Vikings. It's pretty astonishing. Like
It's
I know the
bad.
Vikings
It's very bad.
were competitive last year, but that was just more of a they had good coaches in O'Connell and Brian Flores, and they had some good free agent signings. But their drafting over the past 3 or 4 years has been about as bad as any team in the NFL. And that's really saying something. Maybe it's not the 32nd best or the worst. It's certainly bottom five. There's no question it's one of the five worst drafting teams the past
Mhm.
4 years. And that's what's led to it now. That's not even including McCarthy. Like, that's just like including the general like decision making. Like, Lewis Cine was a bad pick. Andrew Booth didn't work out. Those were too high secondary picks. Now they have a really bad secondary. And this Ty Felton was a really bad pick. And I know he was like a fourth round pick, but like I don't understand why the Vikings picked a wide receiver with like their second pick in last year's draft. It was like Donovan Jackson. They didn't have a pick for 2 rounds. And then they picked a wide receiver where they already had the best wide receiver in football or top three in Justin Jefferson and a very good number two in Jordan Addison. And they had holes throughout the roster. Like they couldn't have used a better center, couldn't have used another pass rusher or someone in the secondary. They had to pick maybe a guy who will be their third wide receiver in a couple years with their second pick in the draft. Kind of an insane decision. And Ty Felton has played like one snap this year. He's like one catch.
Yeah,
That
it's
just shows
insane.
like their drafting has been poor. And I said that all to say that I don't think Kevin O'Connell is doing a bad job as a head coach. I don't think he's been amazing this year, but I think firing him is a vast overreaction, and the Vikings would be making a huge mistake. But I do think their GM needs to be under fire.
Yeah, I agree. I think Kwesi is it's similar to the Bills. Like I think Brandon Bean deserves more heat than Sean McDermott. Similar, it's a similar situation in Minnesota where Kwesi, if you're going to fire somebody, get rid of him and keep O'Connell and try to get someone who's a better drafter in there and try to, in some capacity, fix the quarterback situation because I don't think their week one starting quarterback next year is currently on the roster because McCarthy, I just barring like vastly improved play. I don't see him being a starter next year. And obviously, the other two guys, it's not going to work. So, yeah, O'Connell won't be fired, but next year's a big season. Lucas, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. Raheem Morris in Atlanta. Yeah, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time. It's
He's
over.
done.
Is it not?
He's a great guy. I think I told the story a while back. He gave a little speech to my little league team like 15, 16 years ago when I was living in Tampa. So I'll forever have respect for him. He's a great human being, but he's not an NFL head coach, and I do think this is his last opportunity, in particular because he's a defensive mind. He just, I don't know how anyone could look at Atlanta this year, past maybe the first 3 or 4 weeks of the year, past the Buffalo game, and be like, "Yep, they're a well-coached team. Sorry,
Yeah, I
Raheem,
mean,
you're done."
yeah, look, I think he'll get a job as a defensive coordinator. I think he's a really good defensive coach. I think he really overachieved with the Rams his last year there. He did not have a lot of talent on that defense outside of Aaron Donald, and they were like a top 10 unit. He's a great defensive mind. He's just not a head coach. He's multiple failed stints. I thought they were poorly coached last year. They're even more so this year. Yeah, it's over. I think he'll get the rest of the season. I don't think there's much of a point in firing him now with 5 games left. But I think it's very difficult to envision a scenario where Raheem Morris is the Falcons coach in 2026. That wasn't too difficult. I don't think this one's too difficult either. We're gonna go to the desert and Jonathan Gannon. They're 3-9. They're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Um, they've never made the playoffs in Gannon's tenure. They're gonna have double-digit losses in 2 of the 3 years, a losing season all 3 years. The season really ended when they lost that insane game to the Titans. The Titans only win the season, and it's never really gotten back on track. They had that kind of fluky win against the Cowboys in that Monday night game. That's their only win since the month of October started. Um, Gannon is very similar to Morris, where he's a really good defensive mind. He's going to get a job as a DC, but the head coach thing just didn't work. I think the Cardinals are going to really just tear this thing down and rebuild and start over next year. New coach, new quarterback, a reset in the desert. I don't. I think Gannon's out, and he should be.
Yeah, I agree. I picked them to make the playoffs as a 7 seed.
I
Dumb.
know I've mentioned that a few
Stupid.
times. I've given you some shit for it. It's
Only a
okay.
couple. Only a couple.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the Cardinals need a reset. Like I know maybe Monty Awesomefort survives and he gets a new head coach, but I just think if the Cardinals were going to break out and become a playoff team, it would have happened, or at the very least, they would have been more competitive. Because the 2024 season, they were sneakily competitive. Like they were
Yeah.
closer to a playoff spot than people think. Last year or this year, this has not been the case. I know people are going to say, "Oh, Kyler got hurt," but like I don't think they're that much worse of a team, if at all, with Jacoby Brissett. And I just think it's the overall roster around him. Marvin Harrison has not developed at all. He's a quality receiver, but he's not anywhere near what we thought he would be. And the defense is all right. It's talented, but like it's not exactly an elite unit. I think Jonathan Gannon is a quality defensive coordinator. I do think maybe he screams like a guy that like if he spends another 5 to 7 years working as a defensive coordinator, he'll get another chance, kind of like what happened with Raheem Morris. But I think right now he deserves to be fired, and so I do not think he will be back.
Okay. So coaches that we think will be fired are. So I think McDaniel will be fired. I think neither of us think McDermott will be fired. I think there's a chance Harbaugh's out. I think AFC North loser, I think, is out, in my opinion. AFC North winner, I think, stays, whether that's Tomlin or Harbaugh. We both think Stefanski's out. We both think Taylor should be out, but won't be. Carroll's going to retire. We both think O'Connell will be back, and then Morris and Gannon are dead men walking. I think that's kind of a summarization of our thoughts there. Nobody else is really worth mentioning, in my opinion. It's either new guys or guys who are pretty well established, guys who have earned the benefit of the doubt at this point. But I think those 10 coaches, I think the fan bases are maybe looking for a change in some capacity. So we'll see if that happens. We'll see how the last 5 weeks transpire. All right, Lucas, we're going to now give our top 3 teams, top 3 contenders per conference. So we'll start with the number 3 contender for each one. So we'll do our number 3 contender in the AFC and then our number 3 in the NFC, 2 AFC, 2 NFC, 1, and then the top team per conference, and so on and so forth. So I'll start. So my number 3 team in the NFC, and this is difficult to say given how they've played the last handful of weeks. I'm going to stick with the Eagles. I have them. I have them third. I had them representing the conference in the Super Bowl before the season, and I think it's kind of a byproduct of they do have championship pedigree. They are the defending champions. I think their game against the Chargers on Monday night is going to tell me a whole hell of a lot, whether they have what it takes to get back to the Super Bowl. If they go out there and lay an egg and lose, I'm out on them completely. I'm giving them one more chance. But they're kind of on thin ice. But I do have them third, given their past, but I can't put them higher than that, given the way they've played on the offensive side of the ball for the majority of the year.
I'm right there with you. Eagles are my number 3. They were close with Seattle, so they're kind of like 50-50. I think a reason I went with the Eagles is I think they're more likely to get a home playoff game. I just don't think Seattle's going to win their division, so that's why I went with the Eagles. But if on a neutral field, I'd probably trust Seattle more, which is really weird because one of those teams has Sam Darnold at quarterback. So kind of playing dangerously, but I'm going to go with the Eagles ahead of Seattle nonetheless for number 3.
All right, my number 3 team in the AFC is the Denver Broncos. Look, it's a lot. It's not pretty most of the time. A lot of their wins are pretty unconvincing, but they are 10-2. I think you got to give them some respect in that area. And I don't know who you put ahead of them. Obviously, not the Chiefs, not what they've shown. The Chargers, I think, are just too injured. Nobody in the AFC South. Houston's offense isn't good enough. The Colts are trending in the wrong direction. Jacksonville, give me a break. In the AFC North, it might be a worse conference than the MAC. So nobody else. Denver kind of gets it by default. With that being said, they are a 10-2 team. They have a great defense. I do think their offense is too limited to put them ahead of the 2 teams I have ahead of them.
Yeah, I'm with you. Denver at number 3. It's more of a negative that they're number 3 because they're the current number 2 seed in the AFC, but I think they're very likely to get a top 2 seed, and they're in a good position to maybe get the number 1 seed if they play their cards right and they get a little lucky. So I'm going to have them as the third most likely team in the AFC to go to the Super Bowl.
All right, now we're at the number 2. So my number 2 team in the NFC, we might differentiate here. I have the Packers. I really like what I've seen for them over the past 2 weeks. Against Minnesota, albeit against 9 at quarterback, their defense dominated. And against Detroit, their defense, despite giving up some points and yards, by and large played well. Micah Parsons is an absolute game wrecker. Jordan Love is really, really turning it on late in the year, like he has for the last couple of years. If they win that division, I think they're going to be a very tough out. I would not want to go into Lambeau and beat that team in the cold. Now, they do have some unfortunate season-ending injuries with Tucker Kraft, now Devontae Wyatt, but I've always been a Matt LaFleur fan. I think the talk of firing him is definitely out the window at this point. They're well coached on both sides of the ball. They have a blue chip player in Parsons on defense, and they have a quarterback in Love who has shown, like in the playoffs, he's had some good moments. He had that great game against the Cowboys, and of course, he came really close to beating a loaded Niners team on the road in 2023. I have them at 2. They're gaining my trust back.
Again, we're 3 for 3. I have the Packers at number 2. I think they're starting to figure
I
it
thought you were
out.
gonna have Seattle. Oh no, you put the Eagles out of Seattle. That's right.
Yeah, I said Seattle was 4. Yeah, a Toyotathon is among us. So Jordan Love is starting to heat up. He's been very, very good the past 2 games. And I think Green Bay with Micah Parsons does have the horses on defense necessary to compete. I think their weapons can be a little shaky at times. Like you said, no Tucker Kraft, but if they can get a good run game, play good defense, and Jordan Love can play well, it won't really matter. But nonetheless, Packers are number 2.
All right. So my number 2 team in the AFC, we might switch up here. This is given history, and this is given maybe confirming some priors. I have the Patriots at 2 in the AFC. They're 11-2. They have the best record. I know the schedule's not great, but you win 10 games in a row, you're doing something right. And Mike Vrabel's won playoff games. He went into Baltimore against a 14-win Ravens team and beat them with Ryan Tannehill. He went to an AFC Championship game. Obviously, my drawback is Drake May, as good as he is, he's never played in a playoff game. He's never played in that type of atmosphere. An advantage that they'll have is, barring a collapse, they'll have those games at home. They'll have them in Foxborough, so they'll have the home crowd behind them. But this core of players doesn't really have the experience that the team I have ahead of them does. So that's why I put them at 2, even though they've played better for the majority of the season. But they, to me, just off this season's body of work, have been the most impressive team. They got to a shaky start. They start 1-2, and they've just been rolling since. So they're New England is number 2 for me.
Number 1 and 2 for me in the AFC are pretty interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
I think I know who you have number 1.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have them number 2. I'm going to go with the Bills. I just think as long as they have Josh Allen, I think they're going to make the playoffs. I just think when you have a quarterback like Allen, I do think you could win pretty much any game. So I pretty much trust the Patriots out of every other team in the AFC, other say for the team I have at number 1. So give me the Bills at number 2. Don't have much else to add.
All right. So my number 1 NFC team, I think we have the same team. It's the LA Rams. Ugly loss in Carolina, bad loss, but they are 9-3. They're currently leading the division. Matthew Stafford, despite a poor performance in Charlotte, has been exceptional this season. McVay, I would contend, is the best coach in football right now. They have 2 excellent receivers. They have a really good defensive line that can take over games. Their secondary does concern me. Their corners are a problem. That showed against the Panthers. So if you get a team that can throw, they earn the benefit of the doubt. McVay and Stafford have won a Super Bowl together, although it was quite a while ago, but they won it together. They've been the best team in the NFL for the majority of the season. I think that loss to the Panthers was more of a blip on the radar than a sign of things to come. So I think the Rams are, despite a poor recent showing, they're the team to beat in the NFC as it stands.
Yep, I agree. I think the Rams, are the best team in football. I have them as the Super Bowl favorite. As long as Stafford can stay healthy, this team's rolling. Their offensive line has been playing better down the stretch. If this team can protect Stafford, they're going to go to the Super Bowl, in my opinion, or at least the NFC Championship game. Although Stafford was protected pretty well this past Sunday, and he played horrible, so maybe he needs the offensive line to play poorly for him to play well. But who really knows in the end? But yeah, Rams are my number one, and I think I know who you have number one for the AFC. Just go ahead and say it.
The Buffalo Bills, I'm so inconsistent on them. I'm so reactionary to them just because that's who they are. They're so inconsistent. They're so Jekyll and Hyde. But when they play at their best, I think they have the highest ceiling. If the Chiefs don't make the playoffs, they'll have the best quarterback in the AFC. Um, McDermott scares me in the playoffs, but look, he's won playoff games. He's won big games. The big issue for him has been the Chiefs and their defense. Well, I have their issues with it. Like their defense has played better as of late, and their big thing is they got to lean behind James Cook, and they got to hope Josh Allen turns into Superman. And I think they can do it. Allen, despite the fact that he's never been to a Super Bowl, has been by and large a good playoff quarterback. This is me sticking to priors, but because I picked them to win it all at the beginning of the season. But if when that team plays at their best, I think they're the best in the AFC. They just haven't done it as often. But the thing with the Bills and the McDermott Allen era is they play their best in December. So I think they're gonna get rolling a little bit here. Of course, as I say that, they're gonna lose the Bengals this week because I jinxed them. But like I don't know, man. I just believe in them more than New England because they've been there before. Allen's been knocking on the doorstep for as long as he has. I think they're number one right now, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I mean, like I said, number one and number two are interchangeable. I'm just going to go with the Patriots because I think they have the most. They're most likely to get the number one seed, which
Yeah.
means they only have 2 games to go to the Super Bowl instead of 3, and both those games would be at home. Bills will most likely be a wild card, which means they need to play 3 road games. And I just think the Patriots have a quarterback that's close enough to Allen where like I think the other factors do come into play. Like Drake May is inexperienced, but I do think he's getting close to that level where I don't really care. If you're good, you're good. And I do think Mike Vrabel's an adult who has been coaching in these games before in recent years. It's not like Sean Payton, it's been a few years since he coached in an NFC championship game.
Mhm.
But well, actually, no. To be fair, it was 2019 for Vrabel,
Yeah,
2018 for
it was a
Payton.
while ago.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I do
Yeah.
think Vrabel's experienced. I do think Vrabel's has his team playing well. He's rallying the troops. I am a little wary because I just don't think this team is that talented. But they're winning. They believe in Vrabel. They believe in May, and they'll probably be the number one seed. So I think they're just most likely to get the number one seed, and thus most likely to go to the Super Bowl.
And I do think it's worth mentioning the Bills have never won a road playoff game in the Josh Allen era. All 7 of their playoff wins have been at Highmark. So they'll have to change this here. I just think the Bills are a team that's like they'll go into desperation mode, and I just have so much belief in Allen. When he plays at his best, like he's difficult to stop. Especially with Cook running the ball the way he has this season. All right, so I had Bills 1, Pats 2, Broncos 3 in the AFC, and then the NFC I had Rams, Packers, Eagles. Lucas had the same order in the NFC but in the AFC he had Pats, Bills, Broncos. My honorable mention in the AFC is it's still the Chiefs, just because until they're eliminated, I'm not going to completely count them out. I couldn't, in good conscience, put them in the top 3 though. The way they played this year. My honorable mention in the NFC is Seattle.
Yep, I had my honorable mention in the NFC is the Seahawks. If I had to pick an honorable mention, man, I feel dirty saying this. It's not the Chiefs. I might just go with the Texans. This might seem really
Yeah, that
bizarre.
defense is
So
so
like
good.
that
Yeah,
defense is so good, and they just might sneak in as like the 3 seed somehow. Like I said in yesterday's episode, like they could be the 3 seed. Like they have a defense that could really make a young quarterback uncomfortable. So we'll see. But right, I'm not going to give it one team as number 4. It's going to be rotating between the Texans and the Chiefs. I think whoever wins this weekend will probably earn the number 4 spot, which is a huge honor, as everyone says.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. All right, ready for the picks, Lucas?
Let's roll.
All right, so our standings for the picks. My father, Timothy Smith, is in first place at 134 and 58. Sports Illustrated senior writer Matt Verderam is in second place at 131 and 61. Matt's picks are available online at sportsillustrated.com. Yours truly is in third place at 124 and 70. And then Lucas bringing up the rear at 117 and 76. So our picks for week 14, there are 5 weeks left. This is the last week there are teams on the bye. The teams on the bye this week are the New England Patriots, the New York Giants, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Carolina Panthers. All right, kicking off tomorrow night, the Lions and the Cowboys. I'm going to take the Lions at home. I think they're very desperate. They need this game. If they lose this game, I think they're pretty much a cooked goose. I'll take the Lions. I think the Cowboys' magic carpet ride is going to come to an end eventually. So give me Detroit at home. In the early window, Falcons, Seahawks. I will take the Seahawks. The Falcons, I don't know, man. Raheem Morris, I don't see how he rallies the troops to win that game. Although it's a weird game because Seattle is playing in an unfamiliar time slot and they do have to travel all the way across the country. But I do like them there. Ravens Steelers for AFC North supremacy. This is going to sound weird given how they just played. I'm going to take the Steelers. I don't feel good about that pick, but I don't know. Backs against the wall. This game has Chris Boswell making 6 50-yard field goals and the Ravens turning the ball over 5 times written all over it. I don't, like I said, I'm reluctant to make this pick, but I'm going to take the Steelers on the road. Mike Tomlin's teams usually play their best when everybody hates them. So when the fan base hates them rather. So that's my rationale there. And also the Ravens really have not inspired much confidence all season. Browns, Titans, Browns at home. The Titans will probably struggle to score. Jaguars, Colts. Well, the Colts have not won in Jacksonville, I believe, since 2014. I think that trend continues. I'm going to take the Jaguars. I do not like what I've seen from the Colts in recent weeks, really since that Steelers game in early November. And I think the trend continues. I think the Colts are in real danger of collapsing down the stretch here. Vikings, Commanders. I'll take the Commanders. I really like what I saw on Sunday night. Dan Quinn, despite them being out of it, still has them playing hard. And the Vikings just feel like they're ready to go home. Jets, Dolphins. I'll take the Dolphins. Tua has never lost to the Jets in his career. And I think that trend continues, giving Miami to win their fourth straight, which just sounds crazy to say. Um, Bucks, Saints. I'll actually be at this game, weirdly enough, in Tampa. I'm going to take the Bucks at home. Pretty easy selection there. The Saints, again, just a bad team. Bills, Bengals. Give me the Bills. I do think the Bengals will be able to score, but the Bills are playing the Bengals defense, so they'll also be able to score. And like I said, they've been really good at home. They've lost one home game since the start of last season. I think that trend continues. Raiders, Broncos, not much explanation needed. Packers, Bears, give me the Packers at home. The Bears, I think the luck's going to run out eventually. I think they're a quality team. I don't think they're indicative of the number one seed. I have them losing this game in Green Bay. Cardinals, Rams. Give me the Rams there. That's pretty straightforward. Chiefs, Texans, and Sunday Night Football. I'm taking the Chiefs. I'm unapologetic about it. Until this team really gives me a reason, until they're down and out, until they're done, I'm going to pick them, even though the matchup is not favorable given their offensive line injuries and the Texans' defensive front. But this is the type of game that they just seem to win. So give me Kansas City to save their season. And then Monday Night Football, Chargers, Eagles. I'm going to take the Eagles on the road. I think Jalen Carter and that defensive front will be able to take advantage of the Chargers' porous offensive line, whether it's Herbert, whether it's Trey Lance. I think they'll get pressure on the quarterback. Their offense still doesn't inspire any confidence, but I do think their defense does enough to win this game.
Excellent. It's my turn. I think we have 4 disagreements this week. So I'm still gonna be in last place by the end of this week. So yep. Cowboys, Lions, give me the Lions, similar reasons. Seahawks, Falcons, give me Seattle. Steelers, Ravens. I'm gonna go with the Ravens. They're at home. They have extended rest. I think John Harbaugh is gonna have his team ready to play because it's not a short week, but give me the Ravens. I'm not super confident though. Titans, Browns, give me the Browns. Colts, Jaguars, give me the Jaguars. Commanders, Vikings. I'm actually going to take the Vikings. Not necessarily a homer pick. I just know if I don't know if the Commanders are going to be ready after such an emotional game and such a long game against Denver. So just give me them to struggle in Minnesota. I just don't know if the Vikings are going to keep losing. I kind of hope they keep losing because they'll get a better draft pick. But give me them to win. Dolphins, Jets, Dolphins. Saints, Bucks. Give me the Bucks. Bengals, Bills. I'm actually going to go with the Bengals here. I think they're going to cover, but I picked them to cover against the Ravens. Didn't pick them to win. I'm going to take them to win. I think they have a mini bye. Joe Burrow is going to want to put on a show in front of Josh Allen to kind of say, hey, I know I've been hurt, but I'm I'm better than you. And I just think the Bengals are going to be able to move the ball. The question is, can the Bengals run defense stop James Cook? That's why I'm nervous, but I'm still going to take Cincinnati, believe it or not. Broncos, Raiders, Broncos, pretty easy. Bears, Packers, give me the Packers. And then Rams, Cardinals, give me the Rams. Texans, Chiefs, give me the Chiefs, of course. Eagles, Chargers, I think the Eagles are going to roll in this game unless they just can't score. So it might be just like 17-3. Give me the Eagles. And those are my picks. Turns out we only have 3 disagreements. I, for some reason, marked Bears, Packers as a disagreement, but yep, those are my picks.
Yeah, I went Steelers, you went Ravens. I went Commanders, you went Vikings. I went Bills, you went Bengals. All right, Lucas, do you have any parting thoughts before we meet next week and week 14
I
commences?
I do not. It turns out both of us are going to be in Florida this weekend, so we're both traveling.
Oh, where
Maybe
in
we could
Florida
do a
will you be?
podcast together. Yeah,
Where in Florida will you be?
go down to Fort Lauderdale for a thing. Why are you going to be in Tampa? That's my own neck of the woods.
I'm visiting my sister at college, USF. So my father and I will
Nice.
be at the Bucks Saints game in the early window. Presumably the Bucks will win. The Saints are obviously a horrendous team, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see how it goes.
Excellent, excellent, cool. Any final thoughts for you?
No, like I said, week 14 commences. We'll see if the Kansas City Country Club can, get their season back on track. I picked them. It's the type of game that they win. If they lose this game, they truly are cooked, and it's truly on to 2026. But that's why the games are played. All right, thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday to recap week 14. But until then, so long.